Good afternoon. This is so much fun. I'm Libby Burmaster, and I'm the president here at FCC, and we are thrilled to host this live video Q&A with NASA astronaut Christina H. Now, it's not every day that we get to see and talk to an astronaut aboard the International Space Station, but today we do, and that's pretty fun. We're so glad that you have joined us for this great opportunity. Now, it was just about 3 weeks ago that we received a call from NASA asking if we would be interested in this opportunity and connecting with Christina while she would be able then to do a live video Q&A. Now, of course, the answer was immediately yes. Who would ever say no to that? But then the work began for all of the faculty, the staff, and the students who had to come together to put this event here so quickly. So first off, we thank the students and the faculty from the science department for generating the questions that we'll be asking Christina today. We're grateful to our two students who will take turns asking Christina those questions, Trent Malvin and Dee Dee Johnson. Trent is an FCC dually enrolled student who's going to graduate next month from Thomas Johnson High School, but he's going to continue at FCC this fall, and he plans to earn an associate degree in business administration. Let's have a round of applause for Trent. Welcome. And Dee Dee is a first-year FCC student studying communications, and it just so happens that Dee Dee is Christina's sister. So we are very glad that you're part of this event, and I think that maybe you had something to do with why we have this opportunity, don't you? So we also thank the group of faculty and staff members who have been planning in the last few weeks. We have Dr. Molly Carlson. If you'll give a wave or stand, Dr. Molly Carlson, Caroline Cole. Where's Dr. Mark Frankenberry, the chair of our science department? There he is. Mike Pritchard is over in the grill where they're also streaming, and Dr. Brian Stippelman. Thank you very much. We are grateful to Brian Valco. Give a wave. Joel Yonkins, Keith Rice, and Mike Marshall for handling all the IT needs required for the event. We thank Charles Pham for live streaming the Q&A. And we're grateful to Dave Norman, and I think it's Will Heiser who is up in the booth, correct? Yes, give them a round of applause. And Persis Bates, we thank you for making this event possible also. But most importantly, we thank all of you for being here. This is a very special day for our college, and we feel very honored that Christina chose FCC to host the Q&A. And now I'm going to ask Dr. Carlson if she would give us a little bit more of a background about our astronaut.
Thank you, President Burmaster. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here today. Before we connect with the International Space Station and start our discussion with Christina, we want to share a little bit about her impressive background. Christina was selected in June 2013 as one of 8 members of the 21st NASA astronaut class. Her astronaut candidate training included scientific and technical briefings, intensive instruction in International Space Station systems, spacewalks, robotics, physiological training, flight training, and water and wilderness survival training. Christina is currently a part of the Expedition 59 and 60 crew that launched to the International Space Station in March. She is scheduled to remain on the International Space Station until February 2020, which would be the longest single spaceflight ever completed by a female astronaut. Christina's current mission in space continues a career full of adventure and remote field experience. She has served in the U.S. Antarctic program as a member of the firefighting team and the Ocean Glacier Search and Rescue teams. Christina served as a field engineer in Alaska, and a station chief of the American Samoa Observatory, located in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean, when working with the NOAA. She has also worked as an electrical engineer at both the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center Laboratory for High Energy Astrophysics and the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory Space Department. Christina holds 3 degrees from North Carolina State, a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, a Bachelor of Science in Physics, and a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering. Christina was born in Michigan, but considers Jacksonville, North Carolina her hometown. She most recently lived in Livingston, Montana, and is married to Robert Koch. Her mother, Barbara Johnson, lives right here in Frederick, as does her sister, Dee Dee. While not orbiting the Earth, Christina enjoys backpacking, rock climbing, paddling, sailing, running, yoga, community service, photography, and travel. We are thrilled to have the chance to get to know Christina today and learn about her work aboard the International Space Station. I'd like to now hand the program over to Dr. Brian Stippelman, who's the AVP for Academic Affairs and Dean of Arts and Sciences, and he will serve as the moderator during our session.
Okay, hi Christina, can you hear us? Oh, okay. Well, then fortunately I brought some space trivia to kill some time. So while we're waiting for her to get ready, here's a question for the group. What is the coldest known place in the universe? Yes? That's the coldest place on Earth, but in space it gets even colder in some places. Yes, it is in space. Anybody else? Yes. I'm sorry? Pluto is, actually, I think Pluto is even the second coldest planet. No, that was a different statistic. But it's not Pluto. Yes. I'm sorry, a little louder? No, it's actually something called the Boomerang Nebula, which is negative 457.87 degrees cold. Absolute zero is negative 459.67 degrees, and that's the closest place we've measured. Here's a question about the sun. What is the sun going to do in 7.5 billion years to Earth? Yes? No, it's actually not going to die out yet, which is what I thought. This is actually more terrifying. Yes. That's right. That's exactly right. It's going to enter its red giant phase. A round of applause there. And it's going to get so large, 250 times bigger than it is, that it's going to be large enough to actually swallow the Earth. What is the brightest? It's 7.5 billion years from now, though, so it's not probably going to be most of our problem. What is the brightest star that we've discovered so far? Yes. I'm actually not sure what kind of star it is. It might be a blue star. That's right. The brightest star is called the Pistol Star. It is 10 million times the luminosity of the sun. So here's a generational question for the group. Is Pluto a planet? It used to be, not anymore. It is now called a dwarf planet, which upsets my father whenever we tell him that. And its moon, Charon, has actually also been upgraded from a moon to a dwarf planet. So Pluto, rather than having a moon, has another planet that orbits it at the same time. Speaking of orbiting, are we still, okay, we're still waiting. What happens to the moon's orbit every year? It goes around every year, but it doesn't actually stay stationary. Every year, the moon moves 3.8 centimeters away from Earth. So in 7.5 billion years, when the sun swallows us, the moon has gotten out of town. The entire surface of Pluto is smaller than what country? Oh, they're ready. Okay. Christina, can you hear us?
Yes, good afternoon. I have you loud and clear, and welcome to the International Space Station. Do you hear me?
We can hear you. Hopefully you were able to hear the applause. There's several hundred people in the room here to listen to you. She can't see us, but can we wave at her anyway?
She can't see us, but can we wave at her anyway?
And I'm waving back. Thank you so much.
So we're joined by...
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you all today, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you for being here. I'd like to turn things over to our two student questionnaires. We're going to start with Dee Dee Johnson, who has several questions for you.
Hey, Tina.
That sounds great.
Hey, Tina.
Hey, Dee. It's great to hear your voice. I wish I could see you too.
All right, so the first question is, describe your immediate surroundings. What it's like at the International Space Station.
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, immediately surrounding me, I am actually in the Japanese laboratory module on board the space station. We have 3 laboratory modules and kind of 3 living modules and 1 airlock module that comprise the U.S. and partner side of the International Space Station. So around me here you see a lot of scientific equipment, and one of the neatest pieces of equipment is right behind me. It is an airlock that we can use to put science experiments out into the vacuum of space to the outside of Space Station. So living on board here, it's kind of like, you could say, living in maybe the size of a medium-sized house. We have some living areas, we have areas where we can eat and spend time together, we have exercise space, obviously places where we can do our hygiene, like showering, going to the bathroom, and then of course we have the science spaces, like what you see here. So living on board, it's kind of like living in the same house as you work. That's one of the only differences. We don't have to drive to work, we just get up and we're automatically here. But other than being surrounded by equipment everywhere you look, and stowage and spare parts and things like that, it's just like any other workplace.
All right, second question. What was it like the first time you traveled in space? Way to go, Tina.
Well, as you guys might know, this is my first space flight. So I've had the experience of getting to space one time, and it was phenomenal. Being on the rocket was a neat experience because everything we've been training for in the spacecraft up until this point felt exactly the same on the day of the launch as it had in all of our simulation events. The only difference was when the countdown reached 0, we actually started moving. And we moved up, up, and up. The G-forces started going on us. And eventually, when the 3rd stage of the rocket finally stopped as planned, we found ourselves, boom, in 0G, which means we kind of came out of our seats into the straps of our seats, and we were floating for the first time. And it was an amazing feeling. I couldn't believe that it was real and that we had actually gotten there. The 3 of us in the spacecraft high-fived, of course, looked around, and we all knew that we were each experiencing something very unique and wonderful. The first time I looked out and saw the Earth was actually a big surprise because we had been in our small spacecraft and only had a tiny little window right here, which normally is covered. And we got to a point where we were done doing some of our monitoring actions, and I had a little bit of a break. And I peeked out my window, and lo and behold, completely spread out before me and lit up absolutely beautifully by the sun was the Earth. And of course, despite myself, I explained something like, "Oh my gosh." And I had to quickly tell my crewmates, everything's okay, it's just the Earth. So that they wouldn't think that I had seen something wrong in the spacecraft. But being up here is a dream come true, so it's a wonderful feeling. Floating is obviously a really unique thing that makes it really fun. And the opportunity to look down on the Earth every day and to have the perspective of seeing our planet as one planet and knowing that we're some of the few and extremely fortunate people that get to share this special laboratory and be its stewards for a little while is another really great feeling about being in space.
Can you describe your typical day and responsibilities?
Yes, our typical day for a normal work week kind of is mainly comprised of doing science and doing maintenance and upgrades on board the station for the actual facility of the station itself. So we kind of split our time between those two things. And the science portion of it is really fun because we get to work with teams on the ground that have been working on these science experiments oftentimes for years, and we get to be their partner in space and carry out or install or upgrade or calibrate their science instruments. So that's a really fun partnership. And oftentimes when we do that, we have live communication with them. So as we're working with our hands on their equipment, they're telling us things like, oh, grab that, help with this, what do you see here? And we get to help them diagnose things as they go. So that's really fun. And then when we do the maintenance and upgrade side of things, we get to work with our team in Houston. So all of the engineers who have designed this amazing space station, we get to be their partners in working to keep it up to date, to keep it functioning at its peak capacity, and to keep it running so that it can sustain us and continue to be an amazing laboratory. So, you know, we get up and our day is about 12 hours long, filled with those types of tasks. And our day also includes a couple hours of exercise that is mandated. And part of the reason we have mandated exercise is to counteract the effects that zero gravity has on our bodies. In the past, when there wasn't as much exercise and in the right types of exercise, astronauts found that they lost bone and muscle mass during microgravity because obviously you don't have anything to work against when you're floating around. So our typical day is about 12 hours long. We touch base with the ground at the start of the day, and we have a little conference with them at the end of the day. And then we have a couple hours to just unwind, look at tomorrow's schedule, have some dinner, and call it a day.
All right, thank you. I'd like to introduce our next student questionnaire. This is Trent Malvin.
Hello. So the fourth question is, can you talk about the purpose of your mission and what research you are currently doing?
Sure, and it's great to be with you, Trent. Dee Dee, thanks for the awesome questions. The main purpose is the science, and that's science that not only benefits NASA's future goals of long-duration space flight and extending our reach of human exploration to the moon and other planets like Mars, but it also includes science that benefits the Earth and has real-life applications for the Earth for both commercial and fundamental research purposes. So the kinds of research we do here are basically anything you can think of. Just like however many science majors you guys have at FCC, we have a research program here that's probably doing something in that. We have biological research, human research, that includes pharmaceutical research. We have physical science research, so looking at fundamental properties of chemical and physical reactions. We have earth science, where we're actually looking down on the Earth and diagnosing things on Earth, like amount of CO2 in the atmosphere or other things that we can do with remote sensing. We have space science, where we're actually looking out. We have telescopes that look out into other black holes and astrophysical objects out there. And then we also have technology demonstrations up here. So new research that can benefit either future spaceflight or life on Earth gets sent up. And then, of course, we'd like to do scientific outreach in the STEM fields. So those are all the different types of science we do up here. Some of the benefits for the ground, one of the ones that I think of the most is in pharmaceutical research. So we work on proteins that can be eventually utilized in medicines to fight some of the diseases that we face as humans. And so that's one way that we're benefiting Earth. But basically the benefits are kind of across the board in a lot of different fields, and fundamental research that can help our industrial processes, help us get that edge in commercializing things. So that's the main reason we're up here. And, you know, the other reason I think is also to inspire and to just be that force for all humanity that's looking further. I like to say, if we're not moving forward, we're moving backward. And we like to hope that we're an example of us as humans and as one planet all moving forward together.
Okay, fifth question. You're scheduled to be on the International Space Station until February 2020 for a total of 328 days. That would be the longest single space flight ever recorded by a woman. What would that record mean to you?
Yes, that's true. That is what my mission is planned to be, and it is absolutely my honor to fulfill that duty and to be kind of just here at the right place in the right time where I have the opportunity to do that. Obviously, how I look at it is it's a little early to be counting days and looking at records. I do take it one day at a time, and I also kind of have the philosophy that it's not necessarily the number of days you spend up here or do anything that you're doing, but it's what you do with those days. It's what you do every day. Do you bring your best self to the table every single day? So that's what I'm focused on. But I will say that when I think about it in the bigger historic picture, I know that I'm here because a lot of people paved the way for people like me to be here. And so doing my best is part of my way to honor them, because I know that if they could have been here, they would have. And so honoring the people that paved the way, as well as hopefully inspiring the next generation of explorers, that's really what that record means to me.
Sixth question. What has been your most memorable experience in space or as an astronaut?
I would have to say that the most memorable thing I've done so far would have to be the spacewalk that I was lucky enough to be able to participate in. Obviously, every once in a while, the space station needs an upgrade, not only on the inside, but on the outside. And when that happens, we put on our spacewalk suits and we go out and we take care of that upgrade. And I will say that some of the experiences I had while I was outside for about 6.5 hours are some of the most profound that I can ever hope to have. You know, in some ways I was extremely focused on the work in front of me, and so I didn't necessarily look around a lot and take it all in, but those few moments when I had the opportunity to do that are definitely unforgettable. A couple I can think of was, for example, I was still in the airlock and we had pumped out all of the air from the airlock. So the airlock was a vacuum. And my crewmate who was going out with me, Nick Haig, he opened the hatch to the vacuum of space. And I looked down to where I could see it, and I looked out the hatch, and all I could see was blackness. And I knew that he and I were going out there. It happened to be a night pass, because as you probably know, we orbit the Earth every hour and a half, so half of that time we're on the opposite side from the sun, and it's night. So in the blackness of night, we went out there, and I'll never forget my first glimpse of open space, knowing that I was about to be out there myself. And there were a couple other great moments on the EVA, one of them looking down at Nick doing some work and seeing below him on the Earth a beautiful desert scene. I think we were probably over North Africa, just going by on the Earth behind him, and kind of having one of those moments where you realize that you're doing something that you find fulfilling for a program that you love so much, and you feel prepared, you feel ready, and you know that you're doing the job that your teams have prepared you to do. It's a pretty awesome feeling.
All right, so we're going to go back to Dee Dee.
Guess who's back? So, what type of education and experiences are necessary to become an astronaut?
Well, you know, every astronaut, at least in my class, the 2013 class of astronauts, came to become an astronaut through a different path. And every one of those paths, though, have something in common, which is that we were all following our passions. We were all pursuing things that we absolutely loved. And I think the reason that works is that it's the things that you love that you end up excelling at and being the best at. And so I think that's the main path. But, you know, to get down to specifics, one of the educational requirements is to have at least a bachelor's degree in a technical field like a science or engineering or math. And then also, I found that experiences outside of education and outside of the workplace are just as important. So, for example, putting yourself in unique situations and showing that you can thrive in those situations. That could be anything from studying abroad to deploying with the military to seeking work in remote science places. That's actually the path that I took. Anything that shows that you're someone who can thrive when, you know, any kind of thing comes your way, that you're somebody who can be proactive about finding solutions in unique environments. I think that's really one of the most important types of experiences that you can go out and seek. But number one is to do what you love and to do what you're passionate about.
What were some of the biggest challenges in becoming an astronaut?
Well, Dee Dee, I think you know a lot of them already because you heard me talking about them over the last 5-6 years. Obviously, after we were chosen, there was a steep training curve. So one of the biggest challenges was the mental challenge of seeing something in front of you that looks insurmountable, seeing a challenge ahead of you, a mountain ahead of you that seems impossible, and not letting that get to you, knowing that you can chip away at it and step by step you can achieve it. You know, when we first started as astronauts, as candidates, we had to learn so many different things that at first it seemed impossible. I had to learn how to become a pilot. I had to learn how to speak a foreign language. I had to learn all of the systems on this amazing space station. I had to learn how to fly the robotic arm in 3 dimensions. And I had to learn how to spacewalk, which is essentially learning how to fly your own spacesuit and handle anything that can come your way when you're in that extreme environment in the vacuum of space. So thinking about all those things at once seems overwhelming, but when you look at it as something that you can just take step by step and you know that you can achieve it if you put your mind to it, that was really the biggest challenge. And I'm happy that with the help of my training teams and the help of my other astronauts, we all made it.
What do you miss what do you miss most about life on Earth, and how do you deal with the challenges of being away from family and friends?
Well, obviously, I miss you, and as you said, family and friends. I think the hardest part is being away from my close family. We are a tight family, so we spend a lot of time with each other and talking, but luckily, here on board the space station, we have great communication assets. So I can actually make phone calls to my friends and family at home most of the time, and I definitely do that. So one of the ways I was just to keep in touch, just, you know, emailing, calling, obviously. But other fun things that I like to do to kind of maintain that connection are, for example, maybe take a picture of the Earth of a certain place where a friend of mine lives and send it to them and let them know I flew over that night. And I love getting emails from my friends and family on the ground saying, hey, we were waving at you this morning, we saw you fly by. So I think recognizing that even though we're far away, we're still connected, and kind of taking the unique perspective of what we have up here and using it as a tool to connect with people is really exciting. And honestly, other than my friends and family, there's not much else that I found that I miss. I mean, obviously, I love life on Earth, and I have a great time. I'm a pretty optimistic person in general, but I also just like to focus on the things I have here that I'll never have again, and so that's how I keep from getting too bummed out about missing things on Earth.
Thank you, and we're back to Trent.
So, what do you do for entertainment and exercise?
Yes, great question. For entertainment, we mainly just like to hang out together as a crew. We have 6 folks on board, and you know, an exciting Friday night might be we get together and have dinner together and then watch a movie together. So just sharing our experiences, sharing things about our lives at home, learning about each other's pasts, and just, you know, cutting loose with telling stories and things like that. Those are sort of the main sources of entertainment. On a personal level, we can read. Oftentimes I'll grab my ebook and go sit by a window and read, something like that. Keeping in touch with friends and family, but of course also taking pictures out the window. It is absolutely phenomenal. We have a big kind of bay window that looks down on the Earth, and we can go hang out in there and take pictures. So that's really fun. For exercise, we have 3 main ways we can exercise. We have an exercise bike. We actually have a treadmill, which if you're wondering how we use that, we have to have a harness on that actually bungees us down so that we can have the weight on our legs, obviously, to run. And then we have this specialized weightlifting machine that uses cylinders that are evacuated like a vacuum to create resistance that we pull against. So we get all 3 of those, and it kind of adds up to keeping us healthy and making sure that our bones and muscles stay intact.
There have been so many movies, TV shows, and books that center around space travel. Are there any that you have found to be very accurate or very inaccurate?
Well, I think a lot of movies about space are sort of fantasies about the future. So obviously there's things in there that can be perhaps accurate, but they aren't necessarily accurate for today. I would say that you may be able to predict this, but the most accurate ones I've seen have actually been just documentaries. Movies, if you want something accurate, is, like I said, it's going to have that Hollywood touch to it. But we recently watched a great documentary on board here at the space station called Apollo 11, and it just came out. It came out right around the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 mission, and it was incredible. So I would definitely recommend that as something accurate. I did watch The Martian. That was a movie I enjoyed as well. And for a futuristic movie, I would say there was a lot of accuracies in terms of the teamwork that we like to employ at NASA and the way that we work together both with the ground and on our crew. So that was neat to watch portrayed.
What is the most difficult thing you do on the International Space Station?
I would say that, our day-to-day work is challenging for sure, but I wouldn't call it necessarily difficult. In terms of something, difficult makes it sound like it's something that, we strive not to have to try to do. Challenging is a word I would use for it, because that kind of has a positive ring to it. But I would say one of the biggest challenges we face is just, the mental challenge of being so far away from our personal support network and still having to perform at our highest and our best every single day, and to be ready for anything that could come down the road. If there is an emergency on board, we would have to be able to react to that at any time. So knowing that is out there and that it's a possibility, even though we're going about our daily routine here on board, that's a neat challenge. On a lighter note, I would say it's really challenging not to lose things here, because obviously if I accidentally let go of something for even a minute, it can float away and be gone before I know it. So when you can lose things in 3 dimensions, not just dropping them or leaving them on a table somewhere, it gets a lot more complicated.
All right. Did your training prepare you for everything you could experience in space?
I would say as well as it's possible to prepare someone for all of the technical aspects that we experience up here, absolutely. Our teams are stellar. We do simulation events all the time that simulate the actual the things that we will experience on board in every way, shape, or form. So, for example, we'll have a simulation event for the Soyuz rocket, which is the spacecraft we ride to get to the space station, that includes actual smoke machines to simulate what would happen if we had a fire, the actual sound of the launch, so that isn't a surprise when we launch. And in addition, we debrief after every simulation event. So we talk about what went right, what went wrong, what were the underlying causes of the failures that we saw, and how we reacted to them. So when you do that much training, you really feel well prepared. Obviously, there's no way to prepare for the feeling of being actually in microgravity, and there's some things you just have to wait till you get on board to experience. But for the most part, in every technical way, I felt very well prepared.
Is there anything that has surprised you about being in space?
It's funny you bring up movies, because one of the things that surprised me was when I first got here, I had this eerie feeling like I was in a movie set, almost like it wasn't real. And I think that's because we study and train on it for so many years. We're in mock-ups of the space station. We see videos of the space station. We talk to our friends on the space station. That when I was actually here, it felt like all of those mock-ups, all of those movies and films and educational trainings that I had seen had somehow come to life, and I was just in them. So instead of feeling like I was at the real space station, I almost felt like I was, in a video of it. So that was kind of a surprise. The other thing that was a surprise was how much I loved looking down on the Earth, and in particular where I'm from. So I'm from North Carolina. Dee and I grew up there. And when I see North Carolina, where I'm from, out the window, and I'm looking down on it from up here, it's a really amazing feeling. And it's a feeling that kind of brings everything together and reminds me that we're all connected. And that really is the planet that I grew up on that's down there. So there's hopefully many more surprises to come. I have little surprises all the time, and that's what keeps it interesting.
Christina, if you have another moment, we have a guest with us. Her name is Mackenzie. She's 8 years old. She was the first person to show up today. She brought her American Girl doll astronaut, and she would like to be an astronaut. And we want to give her the opportunity to ask you a question.
What is your daily routine?
That would be great. Hi, Mackenzie. Mackenzie, that's a great question. And, I bet you'd be surprised, but it's not that different on a day-to-day basis from what your parents might do. We get up, we get ready for work, and then instead of driving to work, we just kind of float over to the next module over from where we had our breakfast, and we just get to work. At the end of the day, we relax a little bit, check some email, talk amongst ourselves, have some dinner, and call it a night. So a typical day, and while we're at work, the things we're doing are science and maintenance and just keeping this place running and trying to be the best we can be at it here. So you'd be surprised. It's pretty normal. Now, every once in a while, we have very interesting days. That could be if something critical might have an anomaly or a little bit of a failure, or if we have a spacewalk. That's obviously a really fun day. Or if we have a visiting cargo vehicle docking. That's a day where we would be involved in docking that vehicle and getting a chance to go into a new vehicle and get out a bunch of cargo that is meant for the space station, like new science, new food, new equipment. So those are some of the more exciting days. But the routine days they can feel pretty normal.
Thank you.
Christina, since we have a number of...
Thank you, Mackenzie, and thanks for being here.
Since we have a number of kids here, can you tell us how old you were when you decided you wanted to be an astronaut?
Yep, I was somewhere between 5 and 10. I'm not exactly sure because in my mind, I can only ever remember wanting to be an astronaut. I was kind of like a little kid that wanted to be an astronaut but just never really outgrew it. So I think I had a love for exploring and a love for looking up at the night sky since the time I was really young, and I just ran with it.
Do you have time for any more questions from the audience?
Absolutely. If you all have time, I'd love to continue.
Hold on one second.
I'm Chantel and I'm 10 years old. What do you eat up at the International Space Station?
Hi, Chantel. That's a great question. We have pretty normal food up here, except for how we have to make it. We have all of our food is either dehydrated, so all of the water has been taken out of it, and we have to rehydrate it by adding water to a little packet. So we basically have packets of food with a little place that we can insert water, and we stick it in in a machine that dispenses the water, and we wait for it to rehydrate. So that's about the extent of how much I cook while I'm up here on board. But we have every kind of meal you can imagine. We have, beef, chicken, fried rice. We have dessert even. We're allowed to have dessert. And vegetables. So we don't get away from eating vegetables up here, but really a wide variety. I think I'm not going to be a very good cook when I get back to Earth, though. I haven't had much practice up here.
This is Adelie. She's 6. She's homeschooled, and she has a question for you.
Is it always dark?
Adelie, that's a great question. When you look up at the sky and you think of space, it looks dark, so you might think that it's always dark up here. It's actually only dark about half of the time. We orbit around the Earth about every 90 minutes, about every hour and a half we go around the Earth. So we pass over the parts of the Earth that are in the daylight for about half of that, maybe 45 minutes or so. And then around the back side of the Earth, where the Earth is actually shading us from the sun, and then it's dark. So we have about 16 sunrises and sunsets every single day here on board.
My name is Lucy. I'm 7 years old, and I would like to ask you, what is the name of your ship that takes you to the ISS?
That's a wonderful question. The name of the spacecraft that takes us to the ISS actually has a Russian name because we partner with the Russian Space Agency here on board and also for transportation to the space station. So the name of the ship is called the Soyuz, and in the Russian language, Soyuz means union. So that's the name of both the rocket and the spacecraft that we ride.
Okay, we're going to skew slightly older now.
Hello, my name is Zach, and I'd like to ask you, what would be your biggest liability to you on the spacecraft?
Zach, thanks. That's a great question. I think you mean something that's most critical to our life on board. And I would say that it's probably the life support system. So we have to maintain an atmosphere here inside that allows me to just hang out in regular work clothes. And that means that we have to get rid of carbon dioxide from the air, and we also have to provide oxygen. And we also have to recycle our water. So we have specialized equipment that does all that and maintains this basically perfect Earth-like atmosphere for us at all times. And obviously, if that equipment didn't work, we couldn't continue to live on board. So I'd say that's probably one of the most important critical aspects of being up here.
Hi, my name is Sienna. How do you sleep?
Sienna, that's another great question. It's interesting because a lot of people ask me if we lay down flat to sleep, but there's no real difference between being horizontal or being vertical here because we don't have gravity. So your body can't even feel the difference no matter what orientation you're in. So what we actually do is we take a sleeping bag and we attach it to the wall and we hop in, zip it up, put our arms out, and we just sleep like this. And it's actually really peaceful.
Hello, I'm Simon, and I was wondering, what clock do you follow?
Simon, another great question. We follow what's called GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, which is basically a time it's about even with a time in, you could say, England or parts of Europe. And the idea there is it's a good kind of halfway point between all the partners that participate in here. I mentioned we have Russia, which would be a few hours ahead of GMT time, and then the States, the U.S., which is a few hours after GMT time. And then we also have centers in Japan and Europe and Canada that we work with on a regular basis. So we all kind of split the difference and picked a time that hopefully works well for everyone. But as you probably figured out, it's doesn't really matter what we pick on board because we have those 16 sunrises and sunsets every single day.
My name's Rita, and so you said that you watch movies and you do work, but how do you get internet to work on?
Well, most of the work that we do is actually not at a desk or in front of a computer. It's work that we do with equipment, like some of this equipment that we have right here. So we're constantly using our hands, using tools, and we're not necessarily on the internet for work like a lot of jobs down on the ground. And one of the ways we can do that is that we have amazing ground teams that prepare all of the research necessary that we would normally spend maybe looking up on the internet, and they package it for us so that we have that information available right away without the internet. We do have the ability to get to the internet a little bit for our own personal time, but it's not really fast, and most of us would rather be looking out the window at Earth anyway. And for movies, again, we have great ground teams that actually send those movies up in special communication channels so that they become available to us on orbit without even needing the internet.
So, Christine, we know you've gone over time, and we have a line of about 20 people still interested in asking questions. And so we just would like to get a sense of how much longer you have. We know that you're doing very busy stuff up there.
Well, I'm just so happy to be with you all. I think we have about 5 more minutes in this compass, and then our satellite communication link will actually go away. So I'm happy to be with you all until that time. So let's give it about 5 more minutes.
All right, and if we can just take a moment now while we know we still have her to thank Christine for her time. Maybe give another wave. And then let's take
And thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Stippelman. This has really been enjoyable for me. I appreciate all the wonderful questions.
My name is Connor, and I was wondering, have you felt any adverse health effects like nausea or anything from the anti-gravity or anything, or do you just feel normal?
You are exactly right. When we first got here, our bodies were trying to make sense of all the different inputs that they were getting. Like, for example, one of the things that helps you balance on the Earth is your inner ear, and that is a response to gravity, but we don't have that here. So when we first got here, there was a lot of, mismatching signals to our body. We would be moving, but yet there was no signal that we were moving in those neurological sensors. So I would say that yes, in the beginning you kind of have some motion sickness kind of a feeling, but usually you recover within a couple days and you feel good. I was pretty lucky, I didn't have much of that, but it's definitely something that we have to factor in and think about when we're flying up here.
Okay, we actually have a little bit more of a technical question from one of our students about your research.
So my name is Natalie, and I am looking to be a STEM major, and I heard that you were doing a protein thing with human bodies, and I wanted to know what your course of getting to that education was and the kind of programs you had to go through to get your job.
Yes, the science in that particular arena, it's interesting for me because I actually studied electrical engineering and physics, so I didn't take many biology or biotechnology classes in college. So most of that I had as on-the-job training specifically for this mission. But any scientific training in any field, biology, chemistry, physics, or any engineering branch can also be a path to being an astronaut. But there is a requirement to have a higher education degree in one of those STEM fields. But you can really pick the path that sounds the best to you in terms of doing that. And demonstrating proficiency in your field of choice for an astronaut job is actually the most important thing. Then once you get assigned to a mission, you start to learn about the specific science that you're going to be helping out with.
Hello, my name is Aurora. I'm 9 years old. I have a question about how you move around in zero gravity. How do you actually propel yourself if there's nothing to push off of?
Aurora, good question. The answer is you can't. You do have to have something to push off of. So, for example, if I want to go up like this, I have to push off my feet, and then I have to push back down to get down. So, if there's no force on something, it doesn't go anywhere. I'll show you another example. So, obviously, this basketball is just floating around. No force required really to move it anywhere. But if it starts spinning and it gets some initial momentum, it will move and it won't necessarily stop. It won't fall to the ground.
Hello,
My name is Radar. I am 10 years old. And my question is, like, how long did you, like, train for getting your job to actually be on the ISS?
We had about 2 years of initial training before we were even eligible to be assigned to a mission. And then we went into sort of more extensive training as well as having a ground job. And in my case, it was about 3 more years of working in that capacity. I was assigned for this mission about a year and a couple months before I actually flew. And during that time, it was mission-specific training. So learning the Soyuz rocket, learning the specifics of emergency response on board the space station, learning about the science that I would be conducting. So really you could say I've been in training in one form or another for about 5.5 years since joining NASA until I launched to the space station.
Hello, my name is Kian. I was wondering if you could see any national landmarks up there, or are you too far?
We actually can see national landmarks, and every once in a while I can see a ship in the water as well. Earlier this weekend, or over the weekend, I was taking some pictures of Michigan, and I was able to see a famous bridge in Michigan, and actually I think Dee Dee's been there too. The Mackinac Island Bridge is visible from space. So you can see a few things. You can make out city blocks and things like that. It also depends on how big of a lens you have in your camera. But it's really neat to see what we can see and what we can't see. Obviously, there's no such thing as borders up here, so we never see delineations between countries. We just see the actual landforms and evidence like that people live there.
Hi, my name's Annalie, and what does Earth look like from up there in space?
Well, we can see that it is round, and we can see the curvature of the Earth against, the blackness of space. I think one of the neatest things about it is to see the layers of the atmosphere, so we can see where the ground ends, and then we can see the thin layer, the thin blue layer of the atmosphere above it. And then it's absolutely stunningly beautiful when the sun's shining on it and we're flying overhead. It's very bright. The land is all kinds of different colors, from green to red. You see everything in between. So really everything, that you've heard of in terms of how, all the features on Earth we watch from above, and it's a truly beautiful sight. I think that might be all the time we have today, so thank you all so much. It's been my pleasure to be with you. Thanks to the faculty, students, and staff. Thank you to the MCs. It was my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much.